Attendees are in listen-only mode.
Okay, good afternoon, emerging leaders. Thank you for being with us today. And actually, I can say good afternoon, even though there's four of you, I can say good afternoon to Alexandra and Jennifer because we have two Alexandras and two Jennifers today. So very cool. Welcome. My name is Joe Philippek, and I am from the class of Emerging Leaders 2013. And in a few minutes, I'm going to be joined by a couple others whose names you see on the screen right there, who will be taking us through this webinar today titled Pop-Tarts and Salami, Surviving Your First ALA Annual Conference. And what does Pop-Tarts and Salami refer to? Well, I guess if you stay tuned, maybe you will figure out what that is all about. For starters, just want to say congrats to each of you. You're almost to that finish line. I know it's a good feeling. I guess if you haven't, started your project yet, you should probably leave the webinar and get going on that. But no, I'm sure you guys are all ready for San Francisco in a couple weeks. Annual conference can be certainly overwhelming by itself, and if you're an emerging leader, it can be even more intense as you have both the experience of the emerging leader activities, but also wanting to make the most of the conference, the training, the exhibits, the food, the drinks, all of that. And so though I don't think any of us, the three of us, claim to be experts, we have been to a good number of these conferences, have learned what to do, what not to do, tips and tricks along the way that we're hoping to share with you in this webinar. We're going to be casual. If you got questions about anything at all, just use the chat box to ask questions. We'll be happy to try to get through those as we have time. So moving along, just in terms of an agenda for today's webinar, we'll go through some introductions, what to expect on that Friday for your Emerging Leader Day, just an overview of the ALA conference, the schedule, talk about the exhibits, then we'll just walk through some tips and tricks and conclude with some question and answer. So that's sort of our game plan for today. So who are we? Well, we've got Manya Shore here with us, who of course is the co-chair of the Emerging Leader Subcommittee, but is currently the Director of Public Services for DC Public Library in Washington, DC. Manya's responsible for the daily operations and staff in 26 locations, as well as outreach programs, community partnerships. In addition to Emerging Leaders, she's also serving a three-year term, on the PLA board, and she credits Emerging Leaders with breaking open the door to national involvement, which I think three of us would all agree with. Manya, you look cold in that picture. Were you cold in that picture?
Were you not in Philly?
I was, actually, yes, I was.
Oh, and I was living in Nebraska at the time, so for me to be cold in Philadelphia, it was really, really cold. Well, it was like -10 or something with the wind chill. It was freezing.
It was pretty ridiculous. Philly is a cool town, and I enjoyed when PLA was there in the winter, spring, but that's brutal for a conference. Agreed.
And maybe this will come up in the tips and tricks, but ALA always sends us to the most brutal weather situations for any of its conferences. I'm thinking also of New Orleans at the end of June.
Yeah.
I think I changed clothes like 3 times a day.
That's right, and that's part of, I guess, what the conference experience can be. So,
right.
Yeah, so Manya will be with us here in a couple of minutes to talk about some things, but that is Manya. Now, as I said, my name is Joe Philippek. I was a 2013 Emerging Leader. I am the dude in the picture, if you haven't figured that out. I'm currently the head of continuing education and consulting for Reaching Across Illinois Library System, or RAILS. We're a multi-type library system in the northern part of Illinois, encompassing about 1,300 libraries. In addition to being part of the Emerging Leader Subcommittee, I'm also part of the ALA Training, Orientation, and Leadership Development Committee. I will just share anecdotally, my project team that you see there in 2013, we had kind of the unique assignment project of evaluating the Emerging Leader program itself. So it was a very meta experience, and I can just tell you by talking to a lot of those past emerging leader participants who are now emerged leaders, however many they are, 600, 700, I really got to see and hear the positive influence the program has had on so many people. And I can say it's certainly been the case for me, not only opening doors to national involvement, as Manya said, also just, I think, the position I find myself in today, my job, that was a wonderful thing to have on my resume, got a lot of questions, so it's certainly something you'll be able to leverage for yourself moving forward. And then we've got finally Stephen Yates, emerging leader from 2010, who is instructor and distance education coordinator at the University of Alabama School of Library and Information Studies. He also serves as principal investigator of STAPLE, an IMLS-funded training program for Alabama's non-degreed public library managers. He is currently in the middle of a 2-year term on the American Association of School Librarians Board, as well as, of course, serving on the Emerging Leaders Subcommittee and also the Committee on Diversity. So, Stephen, it looks like roller coaster in that picture, maybe?
Yes, and I think that picture is about 2 weeks old. I was spent a few days in Disneyland
Nice.
a couple of weeks ago, and so this was when I was putting this slide deck together. I was like, I need to put that picture on there. It was definitely, I tried it. My original idea was, I can do Disneyland at the same time I do
That's right.
San Francisco, but then how that all works out in the moving your body around the state, I was like, okay, let's just, it was financially, it was going to be just okay to do 2 different trips. So,
that's right. Makes sense.
so that's why, so I went ahead and got it out of the way early, but it's a lot of fun. If you've not done Disney, I highly recommend.
Well, I got a 7 and a 4-year-old that'll be nagging me for years until I take them, so I'll get there. All right, so that's the 3 of us, and I think at this point, I believe, Manya, it's going to be you talking about what to expect on June 26th.
Yes, thank you, Joe. And also a big thank you to Joe for hosting this webinar. We're going a little off the rails and not hosting through ALA. This is a rogue webinar. So thank you to Joe and to Rails for giving us the go-to webinar space.
Absolutely.
And also to Stephen and Joe for giving up, volunteering their time to offer this to you guys. I'm happy to report that we have some people not named Alexandra and Jennifer who are now in the attendee list. So welcome to those of you not named Alexandra and Jennifer. So you guys are, what you see in front of you is let's say draft, because it's probably draft until the moment we start, but this is what we'll be doing on Friday in San Francisco, and you are the first people to see it. So only those who show up for the webinar get to see it ahead of time. Look all the way at the end, and you'll notice we end by 12:15. So you should have plenty of time once we end our morning session to start setting up and gluing those final things onto your poster board. And when we get to the question and answer, if you guys have any questions about the poster session, all 3 of us have gone through that and understand what it looks like. So you can ask questions about that then as well. So Maureen is going to do more of what Maureen does best on Friday, which is to talk about leadership and also to talk about the best ways that we communicate with our colleagues in order for all of us to be successful. But the bonus of the morning, if you notice at about 11:45, and that time may change, but Miguel Figueroa is going to join us, and he is director for the Center for the Future of Libraries. And he's going to come and speak to the group. And, you know, the thing about emerging leaders is that people now want to come speak to us, whereas we used to have to beg people to pay attention to this program. It's now well known enough that prominent people from ALA and outside of ALA now want to come and say things to you guys, which I think is pretty great. So a lot about influence. Oh, thank you, Joe. Sorry. A lot about influence and collaboration, and also some things to keep in mind as you move forward with not just your career, but your involvement at a national and a state level. And I think that what Maureen is going to talk about is, you know, it gets frustrating. Things don't move as quickly as we want them to, and sort of how to stay focused and how to stay calm during those times. So that is Friday. Thanks, Joe.
You bet. And I will just, going back to Miguel, I will just say that Miguel is in my neck of the woods and working out of ALA office in Chicago, which is in my neck of the woods. And we had him out to Rails, where I work, to do this talk, and it's really great. So you guys, you should definitely be looking forward to that. He does a great talk, and it's really interesting work that this center is doing as part of ALA. So just a little plug that is something that you should be looking forward to.
Okay, so hopefully you guys have been able to spend some time looking at the conference schedule, and it is a fairly unwieldy beast in whatever form you like to look at it in. If you will receive a print copy if you want one at registration in San Francisco, but it is if it's your first annual, you'll notice that it's a much larger print piece than what you received at Midwinter. Just opportunities abound. At any given time, there could be 25 things you could go to that start, and then in 15 more minutes, there are 25 more things that start. So if you have any time between now and then, do spend some time trying to figure out how to dial into what you want to learn more about. I think there are two groups of librarians in the world. There's the kind that write really awesome and engaging titles of sessions, and then there are those that tell you exactly what you're about to hear. Hopefully the three of us today fall into the first group. I've always believed you have to show that you can engage a crowd by being able to title what you're doing in a way that it grabs attention. So that's really an exercise in that, to go through and spend some time in the schedule and sort of see what's going on. Obviously, there are the A-list speakers that we get emails about as ALA members. The chance to see Gloria Steinem and Edwidge Danticat I have a friend who's a literature liaison, a liaison to an English department in her job, and she's like, I have a committee meeting, but that also, I don't want to miss seeing this amazing author. So what am I going to do? So I told her it was too late because she had put that on Facebook and now everyone knew. But you will have lots of different ways that you will be able to, you will have lots of things to choose from, and you will have to make tough choices. I think that's a wonderful problem to have, because it just shows that the organization is trying really hard to meet the needs of a variety of people. And I think for all of us, as part of our DNA as librarians, is that we're interested in a lot of different things. And so this is really that those varied interests are on parade at annual conference, especially. Just some things to point out. There are a lot of different ways to engage with groups of people beforehand. There's the ALA think tank, and there's lots of different groups online, whether on the social media of your choice. But during the conference, there's also the networking uncommons that will give you a chance to connect with fellow attendees that you may have been following on Twitter or through their blog or whatnot. But it will give you a chance to put names and online personalities with actual faces and people. The unconference is always a popular choice, but you guys have a pretty important date going on during this year's unconference. But that group of people communicates a good bit on social media as well, so you can keep up with what those high points are. And then they're starting what is called, and I don't know this much about it, so if Manya or Joe, you know more about this library camp that I noticed is happening on Monday. In my mind, I think it might be kind of like an ed camp of sorts. It's just sort of an organic meetup, but they're trying that out on Monday. So if you're still in town on Monday, you may want to give that a try. If you survive navigating San Francisco from the Pride Parade on Sunday, then you could always try it out on Monday. And then my thing about the schedule, and this is something that I can't encourage you enough. If you, obviously with being a part of the Emergency Leaders Program, you have shown an interest in the organization. So it's time to take that next step for what comes next, and that is what committees or what boards you might be interested in serving on. And for many, it often is as simple as showing up to your first committee meeting just as a guest. All of these meetings are open, and in the rare case that they have to go into executive session, they should be extremely gracious in telling you so. But you can really learn, and I actually have been to a couple of intellectual freedom committee meetings that I've just, were excellent, especially around the time of the NSA leaks and all of that with Snowden. They were so spirited and so, the discussions were so rich, and also the Office of Information Policy, I've been to some of their meetings that they have in their advisory groups. So you really can just show up, and that's why they're in that conference schedule, so you can find them and go. So I don't know about Manya, but I would definitely say my involvement as an emerging leader and my willingness just to kind of fill out the volunteer form, it was really the gateway to my being on the AASL board and being elected to this term I'm on. And Manya, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, I think the reality of being appointed to committees is that you're far more likely to be appointed if the person doing the appointments recognizes your name, because there are a lot in PLA. I believe the appointments are done by the incoming president, and so you can imagine one person trying to appoint dozens of committee appointments with hundreds of names that he or she doesn't recognize. So when they think about representing all areas of the country in a variety of different types of people and specialties, if they recognize your name, that makes things a lot easier. So getting yourself out there is good. And we talked about this at midwinter, this idea of going to committee meetings. The other thing I wanted to add on to what Stephen was saying is it might be helpful for you all to know that the structure of the conference has changed quite a bit in the last couple of years. It used to start, and I don't remember exactly what day, but it used to be an additional day. It really starts now on Friday evening. Fridays are mostly the pre-conferences, and then Friday evening is when the exhibits open. And the conference is all day Saturday and all day Sunday, and then some stuff on Monday morning. So when Stephen talks about that booklet, and you probably saw the booklet at midwinter, there's more than you could ever think to fit in. So everything is very, very compressed, and I think in San Francisco we're going to be lucky because things are closer together. But when you get somewhere like Chicago where you're shuttling around, there's just no way to go to everything that you want to go to.
Yeah, that's a great point too. So I would, I think so many of us now are, just by the nature of, we are fairly recent in the past decade, new to this career. We are also fairly well versed with technology. Even though I love going through the scheduler, which is on the ALA website, and you can build that and go in and read things and connect, there's still something for me about going to registration and getting that booklet to look through, because it really does kind of put things in perspective. You're like, oh, wait a second, these two things I want to attend happen to be, 3 bus stops apart, or shuttle stops apart. So that will take a little bit of planning if you have tight moves. I found also typically committees meet at specific times at every conference. So if they meet on Sunday at 10:30, they're probably always going to meet on Sunday at 10:30. If they meet on Friday morning, they're going to always meet on Friday morning. So that's just something to think about just within the organization. If there are meetings that really, push face-to-face involvement as much as the virtual involvement, that you can, that kind of gives you an idea of how your travel will flow too. When you're making your travel plans, you'll want to be there at specific times.
And just one or two things I would add to what Stephen and Amani had said about the schedule. First of all, be forgiving of yourself. It's going to be impossible to do everything that looks interesting because at annual there is a lot of overlap, and generally, stuff winds up taking more time to get around than maybe you anticipated, because now again, some locations, some cities are better than others, but you can't do it all, and you can also burn yourself out with everything. And I know I've had plenty of conferences where it's like 5 o'clock and I'm ready to get to my hotel room and go to sleep. It can be so tiring. So be forgiving of yourself. But to Stephen's first point about dialing into your interests, um, that's definitely true, and it's such a great opportunity to come out of there with ideas that you can bring back to your workplace in whatever capacity you are in. I know when I was head of adult services, I could go to all these great programs and get ideas for interesting technology we could implement, and I did a lot of things, of course, that related to adult services, but over time, I've really come to see that it's also an opportunity, these different training opportunities, these different presentations, to really broaden your scope and your knowledge of our profession. And a good and a nice thing that you can do if you can make it work is to try to go to one program, presentation, speaker that is in an area that you have like little to no knowledge of. And that's hard to do because there's so much, but you don't know what position you're going to be in 5, 10, 20 years from now. We're all relatively early on in our careers. And I think my experience is a good example, where I was adult services and now I work for a library system that encompasses academics and specials and schools. So now I have to be thinking about totally different things than I did when I was an adult services manager at a public library. So definitely dial into your interest, but also see there's an opportunity to be exposed to some things that maybe you hadn't been thinking about before.
Yeah, definitely. Because when I was an emerging leader, I was in a school library. And I was a school librarian. I mean, now I'm a library educator. So you can expose yourself to. I mean, you really can. I mean, it's a really, I think, for one of the beauties of ALA as an organization is that it really does position you to fully use your library degree, and dial into what you want when you want it.
Yep, absolutely. Okay, so I think exhibits.
Okay, so exhibits are an unwieldy yet lovely beast. And they, was already mentioned, they do open on Friday evening with a little bit. I mean, it's a reception. I think there's food there, and I think there are cash bars. And it's interesting because they have a ribbon cutting and a little bit of thing, but it's very it's almost like Pamplona. I've not been to Pamplona in person, but it's very much a running of the bulls at the beginning. So if you like to see people acting, absolutely out of character, it's a great thing to go and just see people, because they're so excited about getting ARCs, about getting and other free giveaways that are available from all of the wonderful vendors that are supporting the conference. And you can, you get, I know from my, I think it might have been one of my EL conferences. I won a Kindle by going to the exhibit, and it was to the opening reception. I have friends that have won, books for their library, or ebooks, or pieces of equipment, circulation type equipment and things. And there are just a lot of different. There really is something for everyone in those too. Clothing. Different types of clothing. I mean, really, any type of thing. But the great thing about exhibits is you have a sort of like a coupon book of sorts that you'll get in your registration materials. And if you want a way to game the system, instead of having to write all that information on all those different coupons, just run yourself a few sheets of labels with your information on them, or I guess you could tape business cards to it, but I just like the idea of labels because you peel them right off the sheet and stick them on that card and drop it by the vendor, and that enters you in drawings most often for free stuff. So it's
So if you'll indulge me, I'd like to offer a different perspective on exhibits.
Sure.
I don't take anything unless I am actively interested in their product. So I understand that a lot of libraries that don't have a lot of money collect free stuff to give away to either other staff or to the public. I would just ask you to consider the implications of doing that, both from the free advertising that you're doing for these companies, and also the thought that the costs that are associated with what looks like free stuff, their booth rental, the millions of pencils, the bookmarks, that cost is passed on to the libraries that subscribe to their services. So the last few years, if I go to exhibits, I talk to companies that I think my library would be interested in engaging with, but I don't really take anything. And let me tell you, it's pretty nice not having to carry all that crap around.
And those of you that are interested in ARCs and things like that, if you do make a large haul of things, there's always a post office on site if you needed to ship books home or things like that. So if you were particularly passionate about children's or YA lit, and those tend to be, my friends and acquaintances that are passionate about it, that's what they would go. I think I got like 4 ARCs once, and that was about all. I decided that was about as passionate as I got about getting the free things. As Manya said, I mean, it's overwhelming to a lot of people, and you will find, a lot. If you are only interested in seeing specific things, you can study the exhibits map and then just target those specific people. There always, there are a lot of authors that visit that different publishers bring in. So if you wanted to see one of those, and they're pretty good about advertising when those happen. And it's just one of those things that you can the thing about exhibits, you get to engage as much or as little as you'd like, and you get at different points in your career, you can be really passionate about or really passionate against them. So I would just encourage you to at least go and experience it a little bit, or run screaming. You can make those decisions for yourself. But I do think it gives you a chance to talk face to face and demonstrate different products, especially that you may not get a chance to have that time with otherwise. So just you can make it that, I mean, just like the rest of the conference, you get to make exhibits the type of experience you want it to be.
Mm-hmm. And I will just add, I currently have an iPad mini right in front of me that I've been using that I won from a vendor at midwinter. So yes, people really do win prizes. As a cautionary tale, one of my rookie mistakes the first conference I ever went to, I went to the exhibits and people told me about all the free stuff, and so I went with bags, and the exhibits opened and I went to the first booth and I just started like piling in books and stuff. And when I got kind of towards the end of the first booth, someone asked about whether I was going to be paying for those or something about payment, not realizing that, like, okay, not everything you see at a booth is going to be free. So it's not like that shopping spree where you have 60 seconds and just throw as much in your bag. I learned that there are things you have to pay for, and not every book that's on every booth, exhibit, shelf, and so forth is there for you to take. So I learned the hard way, but security wasn't called or anything. It was cool. So
you mean you're not supposed to treat it like Supermarket Sweep?
That's a great game. I haven't seen it forever, but no, I guess not. But you're right about when it opens. It does kind of feel like that, and there are certainly booths where that is exactly what it is, and that's what happens.
But yeah, that is a great point, Joe. Because I mean, there are things, but it's weird because you'll have things that they expect you to pay for right by the things they're giving out for free. So,
Yep,
you know,
yep. No,
if you're making the sly grab, just you know, do that with a little caution.
that's right. And I'll say just on a serious, for me, as Mani said, there are definitely certain vendors I maybe want to speak to, but I have found just kind of roaming, and I will see vendors' names where I'm like, I've seen that places, I've heard people mention them, but I have no idea what they do. So it just like gives me an idea of different organizations and vendors and things when they come to these conferences, what services it is they do. And I may not even talk to them. I may just, by looking at their booth, say, okay, they do X, Y, and Z. And it just kind of, it makes it a little better when I hear them mention that I at least know something about what it is that they do. Okay, well, I think from here we're going to move on to tips and tricks, but I do just want to pause, and this is cool because we've got 8 attendees, and that's the number that we had registered, so 100% participation. Very cool. But I'll remind you guys, if you got any questions at all as you go through about anything, feel free to use that question box. So tips and tricks, I guess, is kind of are just free-flowing opportunity for the three of us to share just some things that are on our mind, I guess. So who wants to start? Manya, do you have some things?
Is this where we tell them
do
why we
I?
named the webinar?
Oh, do I?
Yeah, I will say, so my first conference was ALA Annual in Anaheim. So not this one that was just 2 years ago, but the one before that. I can't remember what year that was, maybe 2008, 2009. And I did everything wrong. I got a very expensive hotel room by myself. I ordered room service, and I spent so much money that my library didn't reimburse me for it all. And since then, I've learned how to be extremely cheap. And I think you'll hear a lot of tips and tricks from people about how to navigate the conference itself. But for me, I challenge myself every time to spend less and less money. In fact, for PLA in Indianapolis, I was there for an entire week and I spent $1,000, which is
impressive.
Not a lot of money to spend in $1,000. Yeah,
Wow.
Thank you very much. So one of the things that I do is I try every time to rent an apartment, either through Airbnb or vacation rental by owner, and then that gives me a kitchen. And I eat my breakfast there, and then quite often, especially for annual, I will bring a lunch. That's for 2 reasons. One is to save money, but also everyone lets out for lunch at exactly the same time, and there's a limited number of places where you can eat. So the lines are very long, and especially if you're in a convention center, the food is really overpriced and not very good. And if food isn't very good, I don't like to spend money on it. So I will, plus then I get to eat whenever I want instead of confined to a certain hour. So I often pack a lunch, and then I tend to spend most of my money on dinner, because dinner is when I go out with friends and talk to people. So the other thing I do is I walk pretty much everywhere. My apartment in Indy was about a mile from the convention center, and I walked it twice a day. So you can save a lot of money on cabs if you walk. And then I try whenever possible to take public transportation from the airport, because you can really blow a huge amount of money taking a cab from the airport. And frankly, who wants to sit in a super shuttle where you drop off 14 people before you get to your destination, especially when it's in somewhere awesome like Joe's neighborhood of Chicago, where there's a subway line that runs right from the airport to the hotel, and you spend, what, $2 or $4?
Mm-hmm.
To me, that's a really good deal. So if I have to stay in a hotel room, which does happen sometimes, I will still have food. You can always ask for a room with a refrigerator. You don't always get it. If you don't get it, you have a beautiful ice container that can keep food cold and safe. So for me, being cheap is, to me, not only how I spend taxpayer money in a thoughtful way, but it's how I never have to pay a single dollar of my own money to go to any of these conferences. What else you guys got?
Yeah, I definitely, for me, I have not tried the Airbnb or VRBO route, but I sometimes will, sometimes some conferences I'll have a roommate and sometimes not. And you can, that's why Emerging Leaders was great. I met one of a guy I ended up rooming with for a few conferences was in my Emerging Leaders class. And then now that I have colleagues that I do that with room with from time to time, they really turned me on to find the nearest grocery store and just run by Trader Joe's, which is what we did in Chicago, or or a little somehow in walking distance from the hotel, and just grab peanut butter and jelly and some bread, and you really can make the most of if you have a tight a tight schedule between meetings or things like that, you really can save yourself money and the time of standing in line, because it tends to, not everyone is equally patient in the world, and so it tends to runs people's blood pressure up for them to stand in line for lunch sometimes when they're hangry. So they don't, you can avoid that altogether for lunch, because really dinner is the time you really can enjoy, or if you happen to have a gap in your time and you can go have a nice lunch. But dinner is really, the real time for enjoying a meal, because there's not, there's very little, if anything, to do conference-wise in the evenings. I would also say if you don't find something in one of the conference hotels, one of the official hotels on the map, definitely get something really close to it and use the shuttle. The shuttle is, I think, a fantastic asset, I think Gail is the only sponsor I've ever known in the years that I've been going. But it's a really great convenience that really and really helps out at the summer conferences.
And we're allowed to say this because we're not on a authorized ALA webinar track here, but the party line is you should always book a conference hotel, because that's how ALA affords to pay for these, but sometimes you can't afford it. So I second what Stephen said. And if you stay somewhere in an Airbnb that's sort of off the beaten path, what you have normally are restaurants that locals go to, which tend to be cheaper than the conference restaurants and the ones that are in hotels.
Right. And so, I mean, yeah, it depends on the kind of experience. There are some cities that I want to enjoy that way, and there's some that aren't. So, and that's the great thing about, I think, I mean, because I stayed a little bit off the beaten path for part of my time in Chicago for midwinter, but I was really lucky. I was really fortunate that I ended up staying at a hotel close to a conference hotel, because when that snow started falling, that was, 14 inches or however many inches it was here in Chicago back in January. Yep. That got to be pretty hairy walking across the street, and this Southern guy was not prepared for that. I can say it.
Yeah, what's up with Chicago?
I'm sorry on behalf of the city nearby. I'm sorry.
I would definitely say, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, Joe.
No,
but
go ahead.
If you don't already have business cards with your job, so if you're a school librarian, or in some public librarians, you may not have business cards, go ahead and do Vistaprint or whatever you can to get yourself some business cards, because you will find yourself wishing you had them. Yep. So definitely consider going ahead and have those. Go ahead and do it now, because in 2 weeks, hopefully, within 2 weeks turnaround, you'll have them. But those are just really convenient to have, and it can really help. It can help your face-to-face networking do more for you later, because if you can have that quick exchange.
Mm-hmm. Well, okay, and for me, and I have two great colleagues here at Rails, Ann Slaughter and Verona Pitchford, who have been to a lot of these conferences involved with ALA, and so we had a nice kind of talk about tips and tricks and things. So some of the things I scribbled down, kind of all over the map, but Investing in like a portable battery pack so you can charge your devices on the go.
Yes,
I found that
amen.
to be very smart. Yeah, you're not having to find a wall to lean up against and charge. You can sit in a session and be charging your device, and the battery packs are not that expensive. I think it's a worthwhile investment. Really, and this, again, all of these, of course, are just my opinions, but if you're going to bring your laptop, really think about if you need it, and especially if it's like a larger laptop. If it's a smaller, thing, that's one thing, but that just adds weight to all the whatever walking you're going to be doing, and no matter what you do, you're going to walk a lot. Oftentimes a tablet is probably going to have all the functionality you need while you're at the conference. But more so, if you bring it along, just think about whether you need it for that particular day when you're walking around. I know people use it for notes and so forth, but just think about the weight that it adds, especially if it's not a very slim laptop. Um, Along those same lines, know that conference Wi-Fi can be spotty at best. Convention centers, hotel meeting rooms, they may have Wi-Fi, but with everyone there, and it doesn't always work. So just if that's an issue for you, just understand if you really needed to be connected, just know that that can sometimes be an issue. And of course, every place is a little different. Um, for carting stuff around, just think about a backpack as opposed to like a tote bag, just so you keep your alignment, save your alignment a little bit for the stuff that you may be carrying around. Just some miscellaneous things. Some of the best moments at conferences really happen in those kind of more informal moments, those interactions you might have between scheduled activities. So you got to be a little brave, and it can be harder for some people than others, but being open to meeting new people, just learning what others are doing, talking to them about that. I mean, ALA Annual really is maybe the ultimate place to talk shop with your fellow colleagues and to make connections. So keep that in mind throughout the whole conference. If you go to a session and you really dig a speaker, follow up with them afterwards. If they're there at ALA talking, they obviously have information they want to share. They're going to be open to that, and being able to go up to them maybe after the session, tell them you liked it, and maybe, as Stephen was saying, share a business card, that sort of thing. Oftentimes I've found, the information you get in a session is great, but then being able to maybe follow up with that person afterwards, talk more about what it is that they're doing, and then it's another connection for you. Can be a great thing to do. And I guess the other thing I thought of is just that, this is a great opportunity to, not only for your professional development, but intertwined with that is getting to know people in a social environment, and that is an important part of networking too. So if you've got people that you've been on committees with, I mean, certainly there's the emerging leader group that your cohort, but others, Facebook friends, things. This is a chance where we all kind of come together in a common place. So if you can set up a let's go out to dinner this night sort of thing, and get to know these people in a social environment, as well as making new friends in a social environment in the evening, it can really go a long way in your networking. So those are some of the things on my list. We are at about almost 10 to 2 Central Time. So, Stephen, Manya, anything else that you have thought of in the area of tips and tricks?
Not
or
for
does
me.
that
I
pretty
think
much cover
you guys
it?
have covered it.
Excellent.
Yeah, I think I mean they're just it's just great to make the most of each time you get to go. I mean, with just make the most of the experience however it works for you. I mean, other than, I would say, comfortable clothes and layers if you happen to be cold natured.
Mm-hmm.
That's really, I think, the best thing is just to make the most of the experience, because you're getting to be around people that are interested in the same things as you are.
That's right. So this is kind of our question and answer, and while no questions yet. So if you do have any, again, use that the question bar to ask those. But we did record today's webinar, and I think Manya, you were going to put it on a YouTube channel of yours. Is that right?
Yes, I have a YouTube channel. I'll put it as a closed link, and I'll send it out. I'll put it both on Connect, and I will put it on the Facebook page.
Cool. Yeah, and for those of you on the webinar today, if you have colleagues you want to share that with, members of your team and so forth, we encourage you to do that. I am not seeing any questions, so our Q&A may just be no Q's and A's, but hopefully you guys maybe learn some things, at least some tips and tricks to consider. But speaking for the three of us, we certainly hope that you make the most of this experience, both as emerging leader, but also being able to go to annual. For a lot of folks, they can't make it, so being able to go, you want to make the most of your. Oops, I think I saw a question. Hold on. What was the label trick you were talking about to enter contests? I don't remember who. Was that you, Stephen?
Yeah, that was me. When you get your registration pack, you'll get it's usually a little bag of some sort, whether it's a reusable grocery bag or some sort of messenger bag. In there will be it's about, I don't know, 5.5 by 8.5, but it's a booklet, and there are three, and there'll be three. It's just pages and pages of three almost coupon-looking things. And it'll say, enter at booth number 1260 for, $200 in ebooks or something like that. And so if you will just take, the information you would have on a business card and put it on, just run yourself a couple of pages of mailing labels with, your at least your name, address, phone number, email address, or your library's phone number and email address, and put, just in, all you have to do is pull it off the sheet of labels and slap it on those things and drop them by and do that. So it makes that a lot easier rather than you have to sit and write out all that stuff. I've never been I've not ever filled out a ton of those, but I have some friends that that have been printing their labels for years. I'm like, okay, you guys are professionals at this.
Okay, and Alexandra says thanks for that. So have 1 minute for any other questions, but otherwise we've got our email addresses up there, so if any of us, feel free to reach out and ask any questions you might think of. I know hopefully I'll be able to swing by the poster session and maybe meet some of you all depending on my schedule. But if I don't, again, I wish you all a great EL experience. Look forward to getting to know many of you moving forward. Stephen and Manya, thank you.
Hey,
Thank
Joe,
you, Joe.
I'm seeing some question marks by three people's names. You have.
They're just a bunch of thank yous, it looks like.
Yeah, you know what? You guys don't see as host, I see these, but it's mostly thank yous and gotcha.
Okay, awesome.
So, yep.
Thanks so much.
So, yes.
Hope it was helpful, everyone. We'll see you soon in San Francisco.
All right. Have a good day, everyone.
Thanks, guys. Bye.
Bye now.